On Press Perspective today, from devastating wildfires in France to the powerful earthquake in Japan to major disasters are testing emergency responders and affected communities. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective for August 4th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. French authorities are reportedly shifting from emergency response to prolonged containment and recovery after unprecedented wildfires scorched vast swaths of the southwest. For better understanding of the situation on the ground, I have French journalist Leo joining me virtually from Paris. Leo, welcome to the program.
Hi, glad to be here.
Now, Leo, for viewers who have not been following this story closely, where do the fires stand today and which parts of France have been affected the most?
There are still massive fires close to the Atlantic coast near the cities of Bordeaux and Biscarrosse today. These two hooded areas gather thousands of tourists each summer. They come from France, but also from other European countries. There are also plenty of villas belonging to rich people. Both fires are stabilized today, but they are still active. More than 220,000 people were evacuated. Now most of them came back home or to their camping place, hostel, etc. On Sunday afternoon, another fire started near Carcassonne, located approximately 70 kilometers from the Mediterranean. The situation on the ground switched quickly from complicated to manageable. So on Sunday night, the fire was already stabilized. Another fire closer to the Mediterranean, but more in the east of the country, is still active. It started 2 weeks ago. It is under control thanks to a big mobilizations of firefighters on the ground and in the air, but it is not stabilized today. The flames continue to progress. Also in the middle of July, another fire started in the Fontainebleau forest, 60 kilometers in the south of Paris. This one too is still active. Other fires were also reported in Corsica, in the north of the city of Angers, in the west. Last week, the French Minister of International Affairs said 120,000 hectares of forest have already burned since January 2026. So the record of 2022 with 62,000 hectares is unfortunately overtaken as we enter the middle of the summer. So other fires might start in the following weeks.
Right. Leo, you've been covering these fires on the ground. What has struck you most about the impact of the fires on the people and the communities that you visited?
It depends on the people I met. On the 23rd of July, I interviewed German and Dutch tourists. They were in a public building turned into a center dedicated to evacuated people. Before, they were mostly based on camping places on the coast, the Atlantic coast. Some of them unwrapped their luggage just the previous day before being evacuated. Even they thought the fire was under control. They were evacuated in the middle of the night. The police told them they needed to leave immediately with only essential stuff, such as identity papers, money, and mobile phones. Some of them were really scared, but they also told me that the evacuation process was perfectly organized. It was not the total mess. Foreign tourists were also very grateful for the warm welcome they received from the municipality, rescue services, and also for simple citizens. Each person was provided a bed, 3 meals a day, and access to shower, activities and games for the children. Some bakers of the cities woke up earlier in the morning to prepare their breakfasts. And on the other side, for the locals, it was quite different. The memory of 2022 fires that destroyed the forest in the same location was still vivid in the mind. When the fire started this summer, they were not so surprised to be preventively evacuated from their homes. even they were not at risk at the moment. And on the 24th of July, when the flames reached the city of Lège-Cap-Ferret, evacuated inhabitants I met were afraid, as they did not know if their houses burned or not during the night.
Right, of course. I'm sure the uncertainty is frightening as well. Leo, what's behind these fires? I mean, how much of what we're seeing today is being driven perhaps by extreme weather, would you say?
The main hypothesis of the origin of the fire near Bordeaux is a spark created by a machine of a technician who was clearing the vegetation up. In Biscarrosse and Carcassonne, the fire started because of a burning vehicle. In Fontainebleau forest, suspected people were arrested because they might be responsible for restarting the fire. One of them, a volunteer fireman, admitted it. It could be the same case in the Var. These fires, in France as well, but all around the world, have a human origin, but they are amplified by climate change. For instance, France has faced several heat waves episodes since June. Temperature were up to 40 Celsius degrees, paired with an extreme drought. The lack of water makes forests more vulnerable. Adding powerful winds, the flames can appear quickly, grow up, and destroy big areas. The forests around Bordeaux, in Biscarrosse especially, are mainly composed of pine trees. This kind of tree is very inflammable, so it makes the situation more difficult to cope with for the firefighters. To sum up, with climate change, forests will be weaker than today, and mega fires will be more regular, more powerful, and come out in new geographic places.
Right, indeed. And now I'd like to circle back to something you mentioned, Leo. So how are firefighters and emergency crews perhaps coping with the extent of this latest outbreak of fire?
In Bordeaux, at the peak, 2,500 firefighters were deployed. They were supported by dozens of vehicles on the ground and 20 aerial means as helicopters, Canadair, Dash. They can carry between 800 to 10,000 liters of water, but they cannot operate during the night. So that means the operations only continue on the ground. These aerial means can also spread a red chemical substance called fire retardant. It does not extinguish the fire, but it preserves areas threatened by the flames. The fire soldiers also received help from European countries. When I was on the field, the 23 and 24 of July, the fire was still progressing. The firefighters said to journalists they had to cope here with an XXL fire, something they have never seen before. More than 330 soldiers were injured during the mission, and 2 of them died. They tried to plan an hour strategy to stabilize the fire, especially by doing massive cuts of trees to stop its progression. But the evolution of the fire was totally unpredictable due to changing winds. For example, the soldiers were defending a road in the north of the city of Lège-Cap-Ferret, and the fire literally passed above them. That's why it took more than a week, nearly 2 weeks, to take control of the flames. 42,000 hectares are burned today. More than 200 houses have been destroyed, and the firefighters are still on site with the support sometimes of farmers.
Right, and our prayers, of course, to those who have been affected by the fire. Finally, Leo, as this situation continues to evolve, what should our viewers be watching over perhaps the next few days, do you think?
The different fires we've just spoke about today still need to be completely extinguished, but this situation remains uncertain due to climate conditions. A criminal fire or an accident is still possible. Anyone can throw a cigarette in nature and start another disaster. The politicians massively reacted to the fires, the way the crises were driven. There is a hot debate in France because of the context. The presidential election campaign has already started, and right now some questions are rising amongst the debate. Does France have enough means to cope with situations like this, especially regarding the aerial means? Is the country ready to face big fires like these each summer because of the climate change? as President Macron dealt correctly with environmental issues during his 2 mandates. Should we add other variety of trees in the area of Bordeaux to make the forest more resilient? Were the forest correctly managed, cleaned, etc.? There are also more local questions. A village, Le Porge, was at the core of the fire near Bordeaux. The flames critically damaged it. Some inhabitants have the feeling they have been sacrificed to protect the houses of richer people in the south. And at Samos, the village where the fire started, other citizens who are also forest owners think the fire could have been stabilized and extinguished as soon as the flames were formed. So the local authorities and firefighters will analyze in the following months how they cope with this crisis and define which decisions were accurate or not. And finally, during the fall, the French Assembly will debate about the public budget for 2027. The MPs will discuss which amount of money must be dedicated to the firefighters, so the atmosphere might be electric.
Right, I see, and that will be taking place, that is, in the fall. All right, Leo, thank you so much for making the time to join us live at this hour with the latest from the wildfires there in France. Do stay safe.
Thank you.
Right, meanwhile, from France, we turn now to neighboring Japan, where a powerful earthquake hit the country's Kumamoto prefecture precisely a week ago. For details, I have Walter, a correspondent with the Singaporean daily, The Straits Times, based in Tokyo, live on the line. Walter, it's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Sunny.
Again, Walter, for viewers who may not have been following this particular story, I wonder, could you bring us up to speed what happened during the last week, that is, about the quake, and which areas have been hit the hardest, would you say?
Right, so last Tuesday, exactly a week ago, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake shook Kumamoto on Japan's southwestern Kyushu island. And the force was so strong that tremors were felt as far away as in Osaka. And the quake this time the impact of the quake this time has been quite localized. And the hardest hit area is really Kumamoto Prefecture, as you said. Most of the death toll currently stands at 38 people, and this includes 7 who died in a tragic explosion after a gas leak at a shopping mall in Kumamoto that happened more than an hour after the quake, as well as 9 people who died at a paper mill when a chimney collapsed. We have seen severe structural damage to infrastructure in Kumamoto, where the Kumamoto Castle, which was already damaged in 2 severe quakes 10 years ago in 2016, again sustained fresh crumbling along the historic stone walls. As many as 45,000 homes in Kumamoto are still without water, and there have been hundreds of aftershocks since last week's tremor, but I think the most severe issue now is an intense heat wave that is posing an additional threat, especially for survivors who have had to evacuate their homes. Just yesterday, temperatures in Kumamoto broke 40 degrees Celsius for the first time in history, and with some 8,000 evacuees who have had to flee their homes, some of them staying in their cars, given that many evacuation centers are overcrowded or do not have air conditioning. I think this is an issue that would potentially get more severe. There already has been at least one disaster-related fatality after a woman in her 70s, after she evacuated her home. She was spending her time in her car, but she has since died of suspected heat stroke.
Right, I see. Walter, what do you think best illustrates perhaps how communities are being affected beyond the heat wave and, of course, the lack of water, as you mentioned earlier?
Right, I think the defining story on the ground right now really is one of immense loss. Survivors, of course, are showing the stoic resilience that in overcoming adversity that I think Japan has been well known internationally for. But the story of immense loss, I think, is one that's becoming more pronounced as the human stories of those who died in the earthquake start to emerge. And there has been an element of national outrage, I think, in what seems to be the senseless death of 22-year-old Kurumi Otake. So she had safely evacuated the shopping mall after the earthquake, but was instructed to go back into the mall by her employer, which is a Kumamoto-based general store called Habitat. She was told to go back into the mall to deposit the sales proceeds from the register into the safe, and that was when she got caught up in the explosion and she has since died. Or take the story of Tran Van Son, 24, a Vietnamese who left behind his pregnant wife to come to Japan just in January to work in a metal factory in Kumamoto, and he would never get to meet his newborn son. So stories like very human stories like this are starting to emerge, and I think this is really affecting communities and giving the country as a whole a sense of how, the sense of loss from this disaster.
Right, some very disturbing, very sad stories, Walter. Walter, Japan, it's one of the world's most earthquake-prone countries. How did the country's warning systems and perhaps the emergency response perform during this particular earthquake last week?
Right. I think that in an earthquake, especially a major earthquake like what happened in Kumamoto last week, seconds count. And Japan has this earthquake early warning system that has proven to be very critical in how it sends blaring notifications to smartphones seconds before the most destructive tremors hit. And so that brief advance window basically triggers emergency automated systems to kick in. So for instance, bullet trains on the Kyushu Shinkansen line could trigger their automatic emergency braking system to stop safely by the time the quake hits. Industrial gas pipelines also rely on that system to shut off automatically before a quake, and this has helped prevent, say, mass accidents on the Shinkansen or prevent mass fires due to industrial gas pipelines. As for disaster response, Japan immediately mobilized its local police and fire departments straight away with backup from across the country. Japan also sent in the self-defense forces, although of course, getting there proved to be a logistical hurdle as well, given that the quake had severed several key transport links, such as expressways or rural roads.
Walter, for many people outside of Japan, we often speak about the remarkable preparation of Japan against earthquakes. How did that preparation perhaps limit the extent of the impact of last week's earthquake? And are there any challenges, though, that remain?
Right, I do think that's a very interesting question, and I do think that the impact of earthquakes really depends on where it hits. So big cities like Tokyo or Osaka are much more ready to weather strong earthquakes, because all their skyscrapers are all seismic earthquake proof. But if you compare that to, say, places like Noto Peninsula, which suffered the very bad New Year's Day earthquake in 2024, that was really bad, and there had been as many as more than 700 deaths from that earthquake. And this may sound very perverse, but I think experience counts as well. So Kumamoto, as I mentioned earlier, had suffered two earthquakes in 2016 within 2 days of each other, of magnitude 6.2 and 7. And those earthquakes collectively killed 277 people and injured 2,800 others, including disaster-related deaths. But compare those figures to the death toll this time round of 38 people dead and 114 injured. And that's just a small fraction of that. And I think it's proof that with experience and with the restoration and rebuilding efforts since the disaster 10 years ago, that has helped limit the impact a lot this time round. But as always, the main challenges, I think, with any earthquake comes with the resilience of Japan's utilities infrastructure, as seen from how this earthquake has left so many homes without water or without electricity. And I think it kind of exposes how water networks, how the power grid can still be fragile to major earthquakes. And I think this is something that, Japan should take a look at how it can be more resilient going forward. Also, I think another main challenge, I think, is how Japan should look at how its disaster preparedness as a whole, and ensuring that there is enough food rations, enough water supply, enough makeshift beds across the country, because you never know when the next disaster might hit.
Right, indeed. Walter, finally, as recovery relief efforts, that is, continue there in Japan, what will you be watching for in the days ahead?
Right. It's been a week. So I guess from the human interest story, gradually we'll be looking more at the business impact, especially since Kumamoto is home to some of Japan's largest manufacturing industries. It's the heart of Japan's semiconductor industry, especially with TSMC having a presence there. And that has led to a concentration of chip-related makers, equipment makers. And while all those plants were not affected structurally, there was brief suspension to the production, and I think the ripple effects to the wider supply chains may only be felt in the coming weeks or months. Beyond semiconductors, Kumamoto is also home to, say, automakers or food makers as well. And so it remains to be seen how large the impact on supply chains would be. But for the human angle, I think beyond the deaths and recovery, I think the focus is now shifting to the heat and what is being done to help evacuees, especially since the intense heat wave looks set to persist for several days, if not weeks more. So how quickly would the authorities be able to restore water and electricity, I think, will be very critical in reducing the risks of disaster-related deaths due to heat stroke or other causes.
Right, as the temperature in Kumamoto Prefecture reaches 40 degrees Celsius, as you mentioned earlier. All right, Walter, my friend, thank you so much for the latest with regard to the earthquake last week in Japan.
Thank you, Sunny.
As relief and recovery efforts continue across Japan and, of course, in France, the resilience of affected communities remains a powerful reminder that rebuilding takes time and unity. Thank you for watching.